Hello, Senior Stoner fans. It's the real Senior Stoner back at you for your Puffco Peak Pro dab of the day. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me. It's going to be a diamond dab of the day also today. As we get started with today's topic, don't forget, if you enjoyed today's video, you know what to do. Increase the family. Hit that subscribe button, a like, or a comment. Contingency plans. You know, when I was a young man, I didn't think about them. As I became older, into young adulthood and middle age, I began to realize how important backup and contingency plans are for everything in your life. Let's discuss. Businesses have them. They're sometimes called Plan Bs, to make sure that the organization doesn't go bankrupt or out of business if a catastrophe happens. Their largest customer drops them. The flood happens in their biggest factory. 50% of the workers are home sick. There's a data breach. What happens? What do they do? Guess what? There's a contingency plan they have for every single one of those in big businesses today. Well, for yourself, you need to also assess the risks in your life. There needs to be a personal contingency plan, a backup plan, a family contingency plan, a backup plan. So you've got to prepare to write it. You've got to get the goal to make sure you can maintain the level of anything you're doing right now, even after what happens. And what happens, you'll never have any idea because it's going to be random. Plans like this should be relatively simple overall. Directions should be understandable to any member of the organization, family, or unit, because you never know who's going to have to implement the contingency plan. I was on a business trip many years ago, 30 years ago. We were living in a house around the corner while this house was being built. We're renting. There was no basement in the house. My wife calls me on my cell phone. I had one of those bag phones. My God, a pipe has burst all over the garage, because that was where the water was, no basement. Oh my God. We didn't know what to do. Well, what you do is, before the winter, you turn off and open up you turn off the inside valve and open up the outside valve, so there's no water pressure inside that pipe that goes outside. Contingency planning is simply to have the phone number for a plumber. We didn't have that. So Mrs. Stoner had to run on. That was one of the reasons that I began to think young about, boy, we got to have a backup plan. If I'm not out of town, if something goes wrong, how are you going to do it? How are you going to do all that stuff? You got 2 babies. So you prioritize risks is what you do. Whether it's a financial risk, a physical risk, a environmental risk, whatever it is, you've got to kind of prioritize it, and you kind of got to have a fallback position. If it's flooding, what do you do? Go to high ground. If the power goes out, what do you do? Make sure the generator's ready with cords. You know how to go. If there's going to be a food shortage, what do you do? Make sure you have reserves. So it's as simple as thinking about everything you do that's important to you, your family, or your loved ones, or the business you're in. Every aspect needs to be a fallback position, and maybe even a fallback position beyond the first fallback position, because you don't know in the beginning, before the situation unfolds, the timeline that's going to be. You don't know what the scenario will be. You don't know whether it'll be instantaneous, that whatever happens, happens, and it'll be like flick a switch, or you'll have time. And time, unfortunately, cannot be on your side when you have a lot of time. What needs to be done is you need to have, when I said priority, you need to have an essential list. What are the most important things? Physical health. Your animal's physical health and well-being. Shelter. Food. Medical care. Money. You'll start beginning to realize all the aspects, all the angles that need to be looked at for true contingency planning. So find a way, is my opinion, to reduce all those touch points, limit your risk. What do I mean by that? A lot of times, people share the responsibility during these situations. Example would be Mrs. Stoner's responsibility might be to do a little bit more of the heavy work because I can't do the heavy work anymore. Mine might be to do the more technical work. Okay, so you realize prior to any kind of situation, disaster, let's call it, that you need a thing called insurance. You need health insurance to protect you from catastrophic illness, the explosion of cost for it, and to direct you to the proper care centers. Well, you need insurance for your cars, God forbid. You need insurance on your homes, God forbid. So the best contingency plans, think about it. The insurance companies charge you a particular fee. They know the percentages of the risk that potentially can happen to you that will expose their company to giving you money to risk. So what happens is, it's not just about putting the insurance or that type of protection in place. You actually have to know how to handle it. What I mean by that is, if there's an emergency, you meet at your mailbox down at the end of your driveway. Make sure all the animals are out of the house. You know what I'm talking about. You have to almost be drilling, like cadence drilling, to make sure you have it down. And that contingency plan needs to be maintained. That is right. My children, when they left the house, my son left first, my daughter left second, Mrs. Stoner and I had to pick up more of that contingency responsibility. Does that make any sense? Sure, we had 4 and then 3 people. Now it's 2 people in the house to do the work of what used to be 4 people in an emergency. It's very important to also look at what happens if your contingency plan did not work. It happens to all of us. You fail. Matter of fact, I can almost guarantee the first contingency plans and backup plans you come up with, you're not going to do very well with. Things will slip through the cracks. So what you want to do is have an ability to easily autopsy your plan. What worked? What didn't work? What do I love and I'm going to do again? And what do I need to replace with another practice that did not work? Once you figure that out, you now can revisit that plan on a regular basis. That's right. You need to involve even more people outside of your house on contingency planning. Family, my son lives up north in Jersey, my daughter lives next town over. Make them involved in what the situation would call for. I need help. They'd come. So what you do is you eliminate some assumptions in life by having these plans. You've confirmed essentially that all your assumptions now have a rigid checkpoint, even with a third-party verification, because the backup system, this is not a computer we're talking about. We're talking about your life. We're talking about your person. So the backup system, is not something that turns on automatically, but it really is, because it's just like flight and fright. When you're in the situation that calls for your contingency plans, believe it or not, you bring them out. This has been the Real Senior Stoner, with all of you, talking about contingency plans, backup plans, and how we need them in every aspect of our lives. And it's not about survival necessarily. It's about calm. Wouldn't it be nice to know that if you got a nail in your tire, your contingency plan is to drop it off at the place that fixed tires, get a ride home, and somebody will call you when it's ready. Not to stand on the side of the road, try to change a tire in traffic if you're in your hometown. You'd have a contingency plan like that if you were on the road somewhere 400 miles from your own location, or even there you'd still call for AAA or something. Contingency plans start out up here, and then they whittle down to here when people find out what really works. You throw a lot of stuff up sometimes, and only some of the solutions really work, but you've got to keep trying. This is the Real Senior Stoner. Thanks again for joining me. You know what to do. Join the family. If you enjoyed today's video about backup and contingency plans. Cheers, everybody. And thanks for joining me.